Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephanie Ivick. I'm the Content Marketing Manager here at eLearning Brothers. Today, we have a great session on using games to train healthcare professionals. But first, I'll go over a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded. You'll receive a copy of the recording via email tomorrow, and it will also be posted on our YouTube. So if you need to leave early or duck out, you'll be able to catch what you missed. Live captions are enabled for this webinar. You can turn them on for yourself by going to the live transcript button in the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to use the questions and answers panel to submit them for the presenters. We also have live chat, so you can say hello to your fellow attendees, share where you're tuning in from, and comment on the webinar as it progresses. Our presenters today are Christophe Merville, Director of Education and Pharmacy Development at Boiron, and Stephen Baer, Chief Creative Officer at the Game Agency. We're very excited to have them both with us today, and I can't wait to see what they present. So without further ado, Stephen, I'll turn the time over to you.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks to all of you for joining. Just a little bit background on myself, and the same for Christophe. I am a product of the 1970s, and so those of you who do not know me, I really started my career early on at Atari, where I was ultimately the director of marketing. About 15 years ago, I started the Game Agency, now part of eLearning Brothers, and my focus is really on creative overall, and I predominantly focus on the Training Arcade, which is a turnkey solution, which we'll be talking about today for game development. Christophe, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, I'm a product of the 60s. I was born the same day as the Berlin Wall. And of course, my accent betrays that I was born in France. After 4 years in hospital pharmacy, I did my military service, and then I joined Boiron, the company that I'm still with today. I moved to the US in '94, and I'm still under the cultural shock. And today I'm in charge of education pharmacy development at Boiron, USA.
So today's, Christophe and I would like to go over a number of things. We're going to talk certainly about how Boiron has been using games and why they use games. Talk about the types of games that Boiron uses and the impact it's had on training. We're going to certainly go through a bunch of tips and tricks with Christophe and how he's building out games. Certainly, we're going to go into then success analytics and how you can use measurement to really understand whether your games are successful, whether they're actually having the impact you want. And then last but not least, Christophe's going to give us a little bit of insight into where he's going, what he wants to do next with games. So we're going to cover a lot. And we decided to set this up really somewhat as a interview style. Christophe and I have been talking about some of this a lot, so I have a sense of the things he's going to walk us through, but hopefully that will be a nice way to guide through this conversation. Really briefly, wanted to give a little background on the Game Agency as well as on Boiron. So the Game Agency, we are, as I mentioned, a part of eLearning Brothers, but we have really three parts to what we deliver. We have a do-it-yourself creation tool, an authoring tool called the Training Arcades. That's what we'll be predominantly talking about today. We do build out custom games and game-based courses. So we have instructional designers, game designers, graphic designers, software developers on staff who are building lots of custom solutions for clients. And then we have really what we're calling our learning experiences. We have arcades as well as Motivate Cloud, really gamified learning experiences, a way for someone to go through a much deeper learning journey and to get points, badges, leaderboards, prizes along the way. So enough about us. Let's talk about Boiron a little bit.
Boiron is a company that was founded in France in 1932. And we are manufacturing and distributing homeopathic medicines in the world in more than 60 countries. And this subsidiary, Boiron USA, is established in 1983. We have two facilities, Newton Square in Pennsylvania, where I am, and another in Simi Valley, where I was the branch manager there. And if you go to health food stores or drug stores, or even mass market, you may have seen some of our medicines like Arnicare, like oscillococcinum. Homeopathy is growing back in in favor with the American public. It was very prominent until the 1940s and then went down. And now it's a revival. So there is a lot of interest from pharmacists, from physicians, from naturopathic doctors, of course. And one of my mission is to educate them so they use the medicine safely and with maximum efficiency.
So wanted to start really at the beginning and how you do that training, right? So and I know that you're using a lot of game-based training to ultimately engage pharmacists, healthcare professionals, but maybe you can give us a 30,000-foot view of what you're doing.
Well, I decided to use only slideshows to display the rule of the games and a couple of illustrations, and really work far uphill before the games, the training starts, to provide the attendees, to provide the students the best possible learning environment, and insisting on the fact that in the proper environment, the students are in fact teaching each other. And because they are peers, because they trust each other, the exchange is much better in terms of retention, in terms of comprehension. They use their own language, they use their own situation. So this is an example. This picture shows a training that I did for the Vitamin Shop, huge chain, and all their managers were there, 100 in each room, around about 12 tables, on which I had a game that was very interactive, and they were asking each other questions. So what we see is a level of engagement that we cannot have with just slideshow types of presentation. I don't even call them training. And also the fact that they were able to talk to each other, the fact that these people who are coming from all around the United States and have the same function were able to exchange their needs, their problems, and so on, was another factor that meant that they remember the situation, they link positive emotions with the facts and the things they have learned, and that is a very, very good way to activate the memory. So it is now part of a company. I always insist for our representatives to use engaging techniques, interactive techniques, and I've created a lot of games and tools they can use to avoid the boring, slideshows.
One of the questions I want to talk about is you and your conversation with me in preparation for this really talked about a preference for game-based training over other methods. I'm curious why. Also, maybe we can talk a little bit about within the game-based training space, digital versus pen and paper, so on and so forth. So
a game is fun. And I must say that culturally, when I tried this in France a long time ago, there was much more of a resistance. In the US, absolutely not. I was very pleased to see that American people they jump on it immediately, they understand, and there is much less resistance to do very simple games. The advantage of this is that they are not shy to ask questions. They are clearly very much at ease. We know that when there is fear, when there are constraints, the memory is not activated towards the fact; it's activated towards more of the emotion, and you don't retain complex facts as much as if you're in a very positive environment. So gaming definitely provides this. It's a very good moment. They retain it, and I always prefer. It's a lot of work before, but it's so much rewarding. And one added plus is that during the game, I can go from table to table and answer specific questions. So I am sure that a high percentage of their individual needs is answered, as opposed to if I was, on the podium and talking about what I want to talk.
Let's talk about the types of games, because I know that you have done pen and paper, you've done digital. I think there's value and things that work for each. Can you talk a little bit about your approach when you're thinking about game design and what to utilize?
So this is the picture of a board game that I designed. It's a combination between a card game and a board game. So if you correctly answer the questions that are on the card, your pawn is allowed to go faster. And of course, the questions are asked to the participants ask each other. So everybody listens to the answer, and everybody listens to the question. So I'm using board games. I'm using card games. I'm using very simple things like cards of different colors, one with a pathology, another with a treatment, and everybody needs to reassemble the thing. So it takes really nothing to create it. And it provides, even in 3 or 4 minutes, a very high intensity excitation and try and errors. And finally, the small group, there is a consensus. And that also is very positive. Of course, I try to find the equivalent with digital games, and 2 of your games, in fact, Jeopardy and Trivia, I use them to train digitally. It was about 150 people at some point together, and they all said that really they had fun, especially with the Jeopardy game. So it is more difficult for me, because that's not my trade, to program a completely new digital game. But with simple tools, you can do mix and match. You can do cross connect the dots, things like this, and have fun.
One thing that you mentioned was group size. So I'm curious if you can talk about, do you see there's being an optimal group size for training and utilizing games? Also, I'm curious about your approach to competition versus collaboration, and where you kind of tap into those 2 approaches.
Yeah, sometimes I used turning point technology, I would say. That means audience response systems that allow me, using PowerPoint and a little app, to have groups of people competing with each other. So when you have a table of 8-9 people competing with 9 other tables, you have 2 things that are happening. Of course, time is of the essence. Accuracy of the answer is of the essence. But in order to reach the best possible answer, people have to, around the table, to connect with each other and exchange information and select which one is the best. So you have 8-9 brains together collaborating, and that's very efficient because everybody listens to the wrong reasons and finally select the best reason. So it is very simple to create. It can be done online without too many difficulties. And I always recommend this type of approach because, once again, it is a nice way to stimulate people to ask questions.
And I think that's a really important takeaway when we think about game design. It is really from the mindset of, how do we turn any training experience from a passive to an active one, right? And so I think that the more active any learner is going to be, the more invested in the content, and the more it's going to sink in ultimately.
I will add that I design my games, of course, in a succession of steps. For example, a succession of questions of increasing complexity. And when I say complexity, is especially with healthcare professionals, that science, medicine is not an exact science. It's very much human-based, relies on intuition and knowledge, on empathy. So instead of having right or wrong, I prefer having, with questions of increasingly complexity, best answer, less best answer, and why. And it's the why that is important, because everybody has to weight all the criteria and come up with a consensus with, yes, we definitely agree, this was not a bad answer, but this one is better. Mm-hmm. So there's a richness as compared to dry right or wrong, even with feedback.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious. There are a few games I think we're going to talk about momentarily. I'm curious which ones you're using. Obviously, this is the Training Arcade game set. I'm assuming you're using other games outside the Training Arcade. So it'd be good to understand the mechanics that you use and why, and what you try to map them to.
So I use a set of games from the Training Arcade first to reprocess and some acquisition of knowledge. For example, I use a recall, which I really like because I can introduce stimuli like images or sounds. Sounds of coughing, for example, to decide what is the best medicine. And so different senses are stimulated, and that's an adage. So I reprocess the knowledge that has been acquired previously didactically from a video, a PDF, or something. And I always try to introduce something that has not been seen before, to the point where the students often tell me, oh, you said that, but we never saw it before. Yes, but the way I presented it makes it obvious, and you've learned something else within the game. So besides the what I call reprocessing games, I use the deductive and hopefully soon the scenario to stimulate decision making and critical thinking. And that's a different level of training that is essential for healthcare professionals, because of course it's what decision do I make based on what.
Christophe, one of the things you alluded to, and I know you and I spoke about in more depth in leading up to this webinar, is when you are writing questions, you talked about building questions in almost a level of difficulty order, right? Giving and our theory is it's always good to give the learner a few early wins so they feel accomplished and they feel successful and they want to stick with it. I'm curious if that is your primary reason or if there's other reasons that you're doing that.
No, really, I especially since I started working with games from the Training Arcade, a lot of energy is free. You don't have to design too much. It's very easy to use, but a lot of energy can be used to create an increasing level of complexity and tension. So the goal is to start with questions that makes you feel smart. And of course, they have that little rush of dopamine and you feel excited, you feel like, great, it's going to be easy. And that, of course, stimulates memory engagement. And in the further, the next maybe 5-6 questions, then it's a little bit less easy, more challenging. It's easier to make a mistake, or the answer is more subtle. So you need to think, but because you have been stimulated before positively, hopefully, by the first 5 questions where you won easily, that provides really a more engaging experience. And a lot of people report that they feel and we see that on the stats, that they feel the 15 or 20 questions that or steps that I have went like this. The positive thing is the feedback that you get in, I feel much better after the game than before.
Well, that's obviously what you want someone to come away with it, right? You want them to feel positive about the experience and hopefully positive about their knowledge. We're going to maybe move into a few different game types that you're using, and I was going to ask if you can kind of walk the attendees through why, first of all, how they work, but more importantly, why you're using them and what the learning strategy is behind your design.
So Sorted is one of the game from the Training Arcade where you have a grid and you need to complete each cell of the grid with labels that are just on a banner above. And of course, they are randomly sorted. You need to find where each component fits. And this is one of the games that allows me to use intuition and complete the knowledge or reinforce the knowledge. If you look at the game, the first column, the Latin name of copper is cuprum metallicum. I don't have to say that. If you look at just the similarity of you learn it and you remember it. And this is the kind of thing that Sorted allows, because it uses a different type of logic, the grid itself, to link elements that otherwise would have been floating. If I had to learn, by heart Yellow Pages, I would probably use Sorted and try to find links like this. So even what is not easy to correlate becomes much easier and much more logical with Sorted.
And that, by the way, before we move on to this, I think what's nice about that is it goes back to the early wins, right? It's let's find the columns that I know, and let me feel successful, and then let me fill in the blanks and push myself a little bit further. Okay, so this next one is detective. It's certainly very much focused on decision making. It's also I think of it as it can be used for root cause analysis. It can be really digging in a little further and understanding linkages. Can you talk a little bit how you're using that?
So the first thing I did with asking, in fact, your team to custom detective in order to transform it from a detective type of police inquiry into more of a consultation. So some terms have been changes. The steps of the inquiry are now the steps of the consultation, and so on. So at the end, you gather clues among all the signs that are offered by your examination, by what the patient says. You have to select clues that are meaningful. A few questions among the clues allow you to, in fact, send either useful signals or signals that are a little bit perturbators. The question, you cannot really base your deduction on the question that is asked. Trying to reproduce to simulate the reality. Then on the next step, once you have all your clues, the different and I think it's the same slide, the next slide, the suspects, which are the proposed treatments, are displayed with very simple description of them. And your role is to link basically what is a useful clue to a possible medicine. You have to gather, you have to select a certain critical number of signs and symptoms to be able to say, yes, that medicine will work, or these medicine will work. So the next step is, in fact, the linking process, where you review all the links. As a designer, you built yourself, you built yourself the links. You can decide to eliminate steps for a medicine because it's not relevant. You can, of course, you decide if the medicine is a guilty suspect. That means, in fact, the medicine you should choose. And you also can select part of the consultation where there are no clues towards this medicine. So it is really simulating the reality. And what I really like in detective is even when you have selected the treatment, you have to select it for the right reasons, and you can review the reasons and where you failed or where you succeeded. So it tells you, yes, you're right. It tells you this is why you are right or you're wrong. And it tells you also, well, you have been right with a certain percentage of accuracy. So very subtle. And in the feedback, in the forum of the game, I'm starting to have discussions about, oh, I said that because the patient said that, and I selected this medicine because, and I can say, yes, but you were not entirely accurate. This is why. So very, very interesting type of game. Once you know how to use it, it's really interesting. And I encourage people to use the template first before starting to enter the data in the game, because you can really, if you think hard, you can really create a great experience.
Christophe, two questions for you to answer in any order that you see fit. The first one is, as you're building it, can you talk a little bit about the assuming you have your content, you've thought it through, the process of building it? Is it a hard process or easy process? The other question is you're deploying it. Have you been deploying Detective as a game for single player or for group play, like we talked about early on in this webinar?
First question is, it is very important to know what you want to achieve in terms of acquisition of, in terms of decision making. The first, in the modules that we offer for our healthcare professionals, we have, I think it's 14 detective games of increasing complexity. The first ones are really to teach the student how to use the game. Because it is not a very simple game. It's not difficult, but it is not one or two clicks. You have to think. You have to think of how you interact with the game. So the first games are about this. So as a designer of the game, I really encourage people to really write their objectives at the beginning and work from there and use the template and play the game themselves, or have unsuspecting helpers to play the game to see, where there are faults in the logic. It is very important to have your logic completely established, even not only the right logical patterns, but the wrong logical patterns. If you want to really simulate the reality where the patient is telling you about stomachache, when in fact the problem is stress behind the stomachache. So this is very important to first use a template, and then once your template is done, it's a copy and paste within the game. It doesn't last. I really encourage the use of sound, of videos, of short videos, of images to enrich the experience and simulate the interaction between the healthcare professional and the patient. But it's fun to create. It's really, once you get used to it, it's really fun.
I'm glad you brought up media assets, because I think that's one of the things we think about often is when people think about games, I think the first thing that many people think about is using them for assessment purposes. But quite honestly, games can be just as effective of a teaching or reinforcement tool. And if you're going to use them for teaching or reinforcement, you want to make sure that you make them as media rich as possible and utilize visuals, sound, videos to really bring the content to life. That's our take. Now, can we maybe jump into analytics a little bit? I know that we have a few slides that follow this, but I know you're tracking a whole bunch of data and thinking about your users. It's less about whether they've completed or whether they've passed or failed it, but maybe we can dig in a little bit further if that's okay.
Of course. So, of course, it looks a little bit, I would say, difficult, time-consuming to look at the analytics. However, it is really worth it. I try to spend as much time as possible looking into details, sorting, and trying to find ways to use the analytics to know more about the behavior of the student in front of the game, know how they spend their time and energy, and also try to refine the game if needed. But so a couple of examples here. It shows, in fact, the activity of two students in one of the detective games, one of the simple ones. And one of them spent 15 minutes with an accuracy that first session that was low. It was 58%. So they struggled the first time, and they spent a lot of time. The second one obviously spent an average of 2 minutes and 16 seconds on the game, which is fast. And the accuracy went up to 100% at the last attempt, the last session. So when I talked to the students, of course, one of them was much more familiar with with homeopathic medicines than the first one. So that gives me an indication of the behavior and the level of comfort some students have. And I can interact with them and say, okay, it looks like you're struggling. What is happening? So that's one example. Another example, this is a very simple trivia game with the 25 most common questions asked to pharmacists about homeopathic medicines. And right away, you can see that the questions where the students spent the most time, 11 seconds in this game, with the lowest accuracy here, 50% accuracy in average, shows you that this question is in fact a very important question. It's a challenging one, so that leads me to reinforce the didactic part and increase the importance of the didactic part on that question, and maybe put another question later on to verify that, yes, they struggle less. So this is, in fact, the same student, and during, I think it was a trivia game. Yes, it was a trivia game. And she spent 12, then 4, then 8, then 5 minutes on in 4 sessions with an increasingly high level of accuracy. This shows me that this student was absolutely determined to have it not 95%, but 100% right. So it is a positive reinforcement that the game works, at least for this student. The same analysis needs to be done on many different students in order to verify this and get more information. But this tells me, okay, this game is engaging, at least for this student.
Do you get a sense, and I'm sorry, because I didn't tell you I'd be asking this question, but do you get a sense about the motivations behind your learners? Obviously, everyone's motivated by different things, but is it about mastery, which obviously this is student showing? Is it about fun? Is it about, leaderboard status? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Obviously, the first motivation is that they registered for the course, and they paid for that. It's not a free course. So they have a certain level of motivation and hope that taking the course will, fulfill some of their objectives. Now, once they start the course, there is, of course, the didactic part, but very soon in the course, they are challenged. They have to do games, they have to do quizzes. And the feedback that we have, and we can verify through the statistics, through the analytics, is that it is a virtuous circle where the more they know, the more they accept to be challenged, and the more they successfully pass the challenges, the more they want to know. And this is exactly what I try to do, is keeping them in that virtuous circle there, where they can constantly verify that, yes, I know this, and increasing not only confidence, but increasing, of course, motivation to know more. The more you know, the more you want to know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that there's a lot of really unique motivations. We talk about learners, and they fall into different groups. I think some want to they want to master something. Some want to feel helpful. They want to actually work with their colleagues and feel like they are a good resource. Some want to socialize, some want to focus on exploring new things and getting more insight, and some just want to beat others, right? So it's so funny. You kind of think about the different motivations.
The main motivation is, in fact, the most basic one is pleasure. You want to have pleasure. how did it decline? Okay, we can discuss. But creating, as you said, creating the environment of the game with nice assets, with a feeling of continuity, using a lot of the images or the that we used in the didactic part, using them again, like in the recall game, to constantly not only link memory to words or concepts, but link memory to sounds, images, clips. We could use smell one day, I hope, because it's a sense that triggers the best memory. But for me, it's really as multisensorial as possible in order to increase the opportunities for the student to feel good, to have pleasure in doing what they are doing, and feeling that the acquisition of knowledge is natural and fun.
I concur with all that. I have one more question for you, and then we're going to open up for others to ask questions of you as well. Love to learn a little bit more about what you're looking to do in the future. So where and not just with the training arcade, but over with games overall. How are you? What's the next chapter for you, Christophe, and for Boiron as it pertains to game-based training?
So I started to, in fact, 2 days ago, to work with one of your games, which is called Scenarios, and which is based, of course, on different steps where decisions lead to other path of in the game with feedback and so on. So it's a game that for me yet, and I think I will be better using all your tools. I will be more familiar with the design of the game, but I think it is a very rich game for decision making. What I like is not only, of course, you have to make a decision about the treatment of a patient, but also this game offers opportunities to deal with communication. How empathetic are you with the patient? Are you asking the correct questions first, the most important question? So when you see a patient as a pharmacist, one of the first questions you ask is it for you? Okay, not obvious, but essential. Okay. So this game allows to allocate points to not only the logic of the question, but also the emotional aspect of the question, how the patient can react. And using, of course, the assets that are in eLearning Brothers, we can reflect this emotion directly and make it non-verbal, but immediately say, okay, well, you start to annoy me. I'm crossing my arms, I'm phoning my elbows, and no, this is not so. This contributes also to simulating the real environment, engaging and make it fun. Later on, that's something I started to deal with in fact, can you believe, the late 80s? But if we can use artificial intelligence, that would be awesome. But maybe that's in a few years. But I would love to deal with that again.
Hopefully not too far off, because I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff you can do in that space.
It's coming.
For those, by the way, who are not familiar with Scenarios, I kind of always refer to it as like a choose your own adventure, if you will. And I think it's fantastic for soft skills. So whether it is patient care, whether it is sales force training, negotiations, management training, it's a great way to put someone in a situation in a virtual world and hopefully let them see the repercussions of their decisions so they can approach it more effectively in the real world. So, well, let's do this. Let's open up the challenge for some questions for Christophe. I'm happy to answer some as well, but I think that hopefully we can really look at what Boiron's doing and ask some specific questions that we can take away some lessons from and apply to other businesses.
All right, thank you, Stephen and Christophe. While people are typing in their questions to Christophe, we do have one very specific about the training arcade, Stephen, that I'd like you to address. So the question is, can you embed audio narration And what other things can you do to comply with accessibility requirements when you're customizing the games?
Sure. It's a good question. So let me start with the first part of that question. All of our games enable audio uploads. So we see that as actually a really important part of any game. Not that everyone uses it, but whether it is for directional purposes or part of a story line, we think it's an important part to really drive home the training part. As far as 508 compliance and accessibility overall, we have certain games that are a lot more accessible than others, right? So when you think about our endless jumpers or our match 3 games that are more like Twitch mini games that you'd see, in the App Store, those are not going to hit that level. But there are games like our trivia game, our Jeopardy game, that and a few others like that are. And the challenge with games, to be very frank, is that there are so many parts of accessibility that we need to adhere to, from colors, which we've addressed in many cases, to audio, to font size, and so on and so forth, even effects, to make sure that they are that they work and address particular needs. That not all of our games certainly can check that box. So.
And here's another question about the games. Can you translate them into other languages?
Yeah, so today the Training Arcade is available in 17 different languages. So you can start into any language you want, and you can translate it up to 17 languages. And that process is really easy. Basically, you write your text, your questions, your answers, your feedback, everything. And then you can export what is a CSV file. You can put into that CSV file the translated text, upload it right back in, and voila, the next time you play the game, it will start off with a drop-down menu asking what language you want to play in. And it's that straightforward.
Awesome, thank you. And then we have another attendee wondering if the games are SCORM compliant, and they'd also like to know, Christophe, what platform did you use? Like, how did you deploy these to your learners? Did you use it with your LMS? Did you just send a URL? How did you do that?
The quick answer is they are SCORM compliant, and they also can be XAPI compliant as well, if you're looking to do that. And Christophe, let's move over to you to talk a little more about your deployment of them.
So some of the games are available through a URL and linked to different parts of our website. The course that I was talking about is is hosted by an LMS, Blackboard. It took 1 or 2 back and forth to make sure that all the variables were transmitted, but it's not very difficult. It's really worth it. And of course, sometimes I use the game, for example, Jeopardy as an instructional game to more than 100 people. I just send the link through the chat, and that's it. People can link and play.
It's worth mentioning that there are 3 ways that you can publish out a game. You can do it as a web object and put it into any learning course you're doing. You can do it as a SCORM package or XAPI package, or you can do it as an embed code. So we really tried to make our games as flexible to go wherever you want. I want to also reinforce something that Christophe said earlier, which I think is really important. And this doesn't specifically pertain to the Training Arcade, but it's something that we focus on, is the value of analytics. As wonderful as games are, because they're fun, because they're interactive, because they are immersive, what I think one of the values that is often least spoken about is the amount of data and information you can get on the players, not only what they know, but how they play, what their personas are as a result of that. And there's a lot of information that you really can't match with any other form of training. So I'm really glad that Christophe focused on that, because that's just the beginning of what you can glean as far as information on your learners. And also on the effectiveness of your training. And I think, Christophe, you and I, we didn't touch upon it as much today, but I think that one of the things you said to me leading up to this is, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when we're looking at the performance of the learner, it's not just what they know, but it helps us reflect on the effectiveness of our training and whether we need to make any tweaks to make it more effective. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely, yeah. You said it right. We have established a cycle of the games are available, then we stop and we evaluate, we refine, we change, and we post them again. It is important never to be satisfied with what we have, and toujours and always try to get it more adapted.
Yeah, agreed.
And then piggybacking on that concept of iterating on the game and changing it, if you update and change a game after you've already shared it via the URL, do you have to send a new URL, Stephen, or will the game automatically?
You don't.
Okay.
That's one of the things that I think we encourage people to. It's a live web experience, right? So as soon as you save it, it is new. The one caveat to that is, if you were to make a change in the middle of a training session, right? Someone does need to refresh their game because they need to basically capture the changes you made, because without doing so, they'll have the old version, right?
And then, still on the topic of creating those games, Christophe, how long did it take you to build your first game in the training arcade?
Okay, the first game was trivia, and frankly, the time I spent was looking for the best features. It was not spent into programming or designing the game. I really encourage everybody to write questions and answer already and cut them and paste them. But once you have figured that out, the most time you have is in making the game the most appealing possible. It's very easy once you have done one or two. I've never. The most challenging games, of course, is Detective, where you have to figure out exactly how it works, although you have a lot of help on your website to do that. But once you've done it, really it becomes second nature, and you spend more time thinking about what you want than really doing it.
Yes, I always kind of go down a rabbit hole when I'm choosing stock photos for something. I'm like, if I keep scrolling, there just might be a better one, All right, so we have another question here. It looks like, as you mentioned at the end, Christophe, you're looking at doing a scenarios game next. So this is a question, I think, kind of about the structure of scenarios. Is that where the learners can loop back, like they review a choice, they make a different choice, and then move forward on a new path? So is it kind of helping them learn from their mistakes? Is that the plan for the scenarios game?
You are the supreme God. That means you decide when they can go back or they cannot go back. So this is really what I like in the game. If you want them to go back, you can. Or if you say, okay, no, it's past, you've lost that opportunity during this session, you can move on. You have to move on. You're really the almighty there. And this is what gives you the responsibility of offering many opportunities for learning. And this is a game where you have to think hard in order to be as forgiving and efficient as possible, because you don't want necessarily the person to go back and go back and go back. This is boring, but you want to provide, so that's where the hierarchy of complexity of questions is important, if you can do it, if the nature of the situation allows it. So the little I've worked with, I've worked only 5 hours on this game, but the little I to learn it first, and to extract all the possibilities. the more you find opportunities to place the student into really interesting learning situations, even if they seem to have failed or not given the best answer.
It's worth mentioning when it comes to the games within the training arcade, scenarios is certainly the most time intensive to design. Less about building it. It's more about the instructional design part that goes into it, because you want to make sure that it feels relevant, and you want to make sure it feels real. You want to make sure that you're building a simulated learning experience that feels as applicable in the field as it does in the digital world. But I will tell you, I just wrote an article on this topic about immersive training, and I think scenarios falls right into that. Scenarios is a really great way to allow someone to get their head around a storyline that's contextually relevant, try out different skills, see what works, see why it doesn't work, get some feedback if you want to give them advanced feedback on it, and really hone in those skills so that they can perform better in the field. So I encourage anyone who has access to the game to really give it a shot, because it's very valuable in my opinion.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen. And I will post a link to a free trial of the Training Arcade in the chat. So if you want to take a look at the Scenarios game or any of the other games and see how easy it is to build them, you can sign up for a free trial. Those are all of the questions we have right now. If anyone wants to submit a last-minute question, type fast. Otherwise, thank you so much, Stephen and Christophe, for taking the time to share this with us today. I think it was a great look at different ways we can incorporate games into our training. And everyone, thank you for joining us. Thanks for spending your afternoon with us. We hope that we'll see you on another webinar in the future. If you have more questions, if you think of questions later, this is Stephen and Christophe's contact information right on the screen. And the recording will be sent out tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.